Good afternoon. Now, every Sunday, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former politician, sports personality who's had a fascinating career to take a look at life after the job. We talk the highs, the lows and the lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And this week, my focus is on the bear pit of the Westminster and European Parliaments. My guest has been a high-profile politician in both arenas as a Conservative MP and later MEP. He was the first Tory to win the seat of Edmonton in nearly half a century. And when he won in 1983, Ian Twinn had a majority of just 500 in a marginal seat that was swept up by Labour in Blair's landslide election victory of 1997. A confirmed Eurosceptic, he briefly became an MEP before leaving politics for advertising. He's now a consultant and advisor on regulation and public affairs. Well, there's no point asking him now. It says it all there. No, I'm joined by the man himself, Ian Twinn. Ian,
hello.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Right, so talk to me a bit about you, because you won a parliamentary seat with just 500 votes difference. Yes. Talk to me about how you got into politics, why you got in, and about just yourself, really.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved the political process. Thought I was probably a Tory, when you were a teenager. Became a proper Tory at university, went off, did academic work, became a lecturer, polytechnic lecturer. Unusual for a Tory, but a polytechnic lecturer. And then I always wanted to stand for Parliament, and the chance came up to stand up for a safe Labour seat, Edmonton. And people said to me, well, don't worry, you can get a nice, safe Tory seat like Southgate later, when just fight this one, do it well, and then next time round we'll find you something decent. And I won.
You won.
And we had it for 14 years.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Oh, it was great. It was wonderful. It was lovely. I mean, it's a lovely place. I mean,
it is nice, isn't it?
Yeah, people are great, and a real big range of different communities there. So that was enjoyable, and being able to help people, literally, but also having the chance in Parliament to change a little bit of legislation and get involved, support Margaret Thatcher at the time.
Margaret Thatcher, what was she like? Did you actually get close to her and talk to her?
Yes. Because
some of them don't let you anywhere near them. Some people say they've never spoken to our leaders and things.
No.
They're in the same chamber.
No, she, very kindly, quite motherly at times,
was
actually.
Was
she? Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She doesn't come across that way.
But she liked arguments. And if you didn't have anything to say and you couldn't defend what you had rather sillily said off the top of your head, then you would, eaten, dead meat. But if you could keep your end up, she liked it. She loved it.
You see, that's the thing. I see Margaret Thatcher, when I was at the time, and I thought she was fabulous, I think she was the reason why I, myself thought, that I would be a Conservative and a Tory. I can remember telling my dad, Daddy, because I'd gone to this nice posh boarding school, I did go to a comprehensive for a while, and then my dad got a nice job and, decided to send me off to this boarding school. And I remember at the end of it, I said, Daddy, I think I'm going to vote Conservative. And he went, get out of my house. No child of mine votes for a racist party. That's what he said.
Oh,
that's what he thought at the time. That's what he said.
Yeah.
But that's not, I don't believe that's, that was his perception of what the Tory party were. But he also had respect for Margaret Thatcher.
Yes. She was, she knew where she wanted to go, and she took advice, which is good. And she steered. It's been things like the right to buy council housing, helped an awful lot. It liberated people, certainly in Edmonton, to for the first time ever, to get their own home. And the selling of nationalised industry shares enabled people suddenly to work out, hang on a minute, I work for this company, now I've got shares in it too, and we want a say in this. And in a way, it bypassed the trade unions a bit, until they suddenly realised that they needed to be part of the same scheme and support it. So she was wonderful, changed the country.
Well, she did, yes. And you realise that a woman can lead the country. Yeah. And she's been an example, of course. Then we had Teresa May that sort of... Yeah. What was Teresa May like? I mean, what?
She was lovely. And again, would listen and argue quite happily. But it was a very short time. And we had the 2017 election where someone put into a manifesto what sounded like a tax on pensioners. and that did not go down
No,
well.
that
And
didn't.
that almost killed it that night when it came out on the news.
Yeah.
And I was on the doorsteps, actually in Twickenham that night, and you could feel someone had pulled the bath plug.
Right.
It was quite serious.
But I mean, you lost your seat, was it in 1997?
I did.
Same time as Portillo? And,
Yes.
And of course, Tony Blair was
Yes,
new.
he came in.
Yeah.
When I drove home, because we live in Dulwich in South London, although we had a place up there, we drove home that night back to Dulwich to rescue the boys who were at school and they were staying with friends. And we drove along the embankment on the Westminster side, but all the noise was coming over from the party in the festival hall from Blair, celebrating. And it was a bit difficult to take. You've just been chucked out, and you've got all this partying going on from the Labour Party, from New Labour.
Yes, New Labour.
Yeah.
Yes. And that all went wrong as well, though. But it always does, though. If a prime minister is in for a long time,
Yeah.
then eventually it will all go.
It does.
It does. I mean, Boris has been in now for a bit. Do you think he's... I quite like him. I mean, it's his personality. He does things. They go, he never answers the questions, but then people laugh at that.
Yeah.
They find it entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like him too.
Yeah.
I think that, from my point of view, I'd rather we got back to making Brexit work properly.
Yes.
Maybe trying to do less but doing it better. I think the levelling up is good. Making sure that the whole of the country is treated equally, that we get some of the northern cities and some of the other cities, even in the south, to compete better for jobs and for being prosperous. That's great. And just do that. And then we'll judge him on that, not on everything else. But then COVID's come along, and it's very difficult and been expensive.
It's been expensive, especially to some of the people who know the people, where they've handed out contracts to people who didn't appear to have much experience. But then, I don't know, part of that is if you don't know what to do, and you might try and draw on the people around you that might be able to help. I don't know whether that's as sinister as people are making out. I'm not sure.
I think in peacetime, I would be very cynical about it. I think given that this just hit us, and for some reason, the NHS procurement hadn't stocked up on these things and kept up-to-date stocks on it, we suddenly needed the masks and the protection wear and had to develop vaccines. I think that the government probably just said, we'll get it at any price and we'll buy from different people and we'll make sure we've got enough. And he did that, and that works. So I do forgive the buying from different people for that. I think we needed it. Yeah. If they'd not done that, we'd be sitting here now and saying, what were they doing?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be investigated further anyway. Now, you were an MEP as well, which I always find a bit of an odd job, because it just seems to me they get a six-figure sum.
I didn't know it was a job.
It isn't, is it? Exactly. It's six-figure sum. They go off and have jollies in Europe and Brussels. What was that about? What do they do?
Well, say yes and no to legislation which the European Commission propose, then it comes to the Parliament, and the Parliament discuss it, make changes, and then it goes back and it goes to the nation states as well as to the European Commission again to see whether they like the changes. But from I was only there a year because it was the end of a mandate. My colleague who had to retire because he had Parkinson's disease. So I was very fortunate to have this end of the mandate year. But I had more power and influence over one or two pieces of legislation in a year there than I ever did at Westminster.
Really?
Because unless you're a minister, and a very senior minister, you don't have a
all.
lot of power at Westminster. You can argue, you can make small changes, which we will do. But I got there one night. One of my colleagues who was taking the legislation through said, I need your help. You've been lobbying on this from the advertising industry, from a consumer affairs point of view for the last year, and we've seen what you've been saying about it. So you come and help me take this piece of legislation through. And I did, and we made changes, and we got another piece through as well.
It's quite a bit
which
of power.
Was great. It was real.
Isn't it? Real power.
Real politics, with a small p.
Yeah.
Actually, how you get something done. So that was great.
Yeah. So now, what are you doing now then? It's all finished. You're not doing politics anymore in that way.
In 97, I started looking for a job. After a year, I hadn't got one, which was a little bit worrying at times. And then I managed to, I was successful, got a job in the body which represents advertisers. I was a public affairs director, and I did that till 2017. I took a year off for the MEP bit. And now I'm retired from that.
That's nice.
So I'm digging up dahlias at the moment.
Are you?
Because it's getting a bit cold in London and they need to go in the greenhouse.
I'm surprised you're not going to write a book. Are you going to write a book?
I've read a lot of books by people who were MPs, and unless they've got a lot to say, they're not the best readout.
Is it not?
No. No. They become, when you see them remaindered in Charing Cross Road in London, in the second-hand bookshops, you know, maybe they probably should have done more gardening.
Yeah, well, digging up dahlias sounds like about the right thing to do, Ian. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Wow. Fabulous to hear Ian Twinn talking to us about his experience